that you can hear me, especially the folks who noted they didn't have audio. All right, excellent. Thank you, folks. I appreciate all the folks who noted that, and we apologize for the technical challenge. All right, well, I'm going to start us off today while Lindsay comes back on. As some of you are aware, I also work on the project with Lindsay and Lauren, helping make sure that the word is out and the understanding is complete on why the census is so critical to us in community action. So what we're going to talk about today is pretty quickly what the census is, why it matters to us, why is VITA an important part of this, what can you do locally in your agencies and in your communities to help get out the count, next steps and questions, and we are extremely excited that we will be sharing with you today a special toolkit that has been developed with VITA and community action and how to help that move forward. So what is the census? Let's check Lindsay's audio. I think perhaps we have her live.
Maybe. Can you hear me now?
I can indeed. So we have just gotten through the introduction into what is the census. Yep. Would you please take over?
I will certainly take over. So the census is something that we have been doing in this country since the 1790. That was the first year that we did the census. We do it every 10 years, and we do it because the Constitution tells us to. It is Article 1, Section 2. The founding fathers wanted us to count all of the people who live in the United States every 10 years to apportion. Debt was one of the things that they apportioned back in the day. They also did federal resources, and they knew that the country was going to grow. And they knew that if they continued to do a real-time count every 10 years, that the resources of the nation could be allocated fairly. So that is why we do this every 10 years. Oh, I do have the ball. Okay. These are the census questions. So the next thing people ask me is, well, what is the census actually asking for? There are about 10 questions. You can see them on your screen. Age, they ask both in years and months, and then they ask for date of birth to check people's math, I think. They will ask Hispanic origin, which is a yes or no, and then which region. They'll ask race. This decade, they've changed the race question, and instead of just being one box, you can check more than one box, or you can create your own race if you're multi-ethnic. Relationship, they're going to ask how this person's related to the first person on the form. So in theory, the people who fill out the form will put themselves down first, and then they ask for relationship. So is it a daughter? Is it a friend? Is it a spouse? They will ask gender, male, female. They're going to ask if you own or rent your house or mobile home or apartment. And then they do a few operational questions. How many people lived here? And they do that because a lot of people don't include everyone living in the house, especially parents of young children. Young children are one of the most commonly left off groups. So the parents fill out the census form for themselves, but don't include their children. They ask how many people lived there on April 1st. So if the numbers don't match the people that were listed, the Census Bureau can come back and ask follow-up questions. And they also ask for the telephone number and the name of the person filling out that form so they know who to go back to ask questions. This is it. This is all that's on this form. I know that many of you have seen the news over the summer. The citizenship question was a possibility. The Supreme Court struck it down in July. There's a little bit more back and forth, and it was laid to rest in the end of July or early August. These are the questions, and we will show you the actual census forms when we show you the toolkit at the end of the presentation. So they're demographic questions. These are things that are often found on tax forms or on a LIHEAP application form or TANF form, basic demographic questions. It's really all they're asking. So once we add up all the census numbers, we do this big count. The data is used in a lot of different ways. The biggest thing we use it for is to apportion congressional seats. So they add all the people who live in the United States up, they count them all, and then they divide it by 435. That's the number of members in Congress. and they figure out how many people belong in each congressional district. Some states, like Delaware and Vermont and South Dakota, automatically get a seat, even if they don't have as many people as would be required normally for a congressional seat, because they are a state, so they are allotted one. I think the number is going to be about 810,000 people per congressional district after this next census. And so those states don't have 810,000 people, but because they are a full state, they get a representative. And then the rest of the seats are divvied up based on population. So we're looking at a lot of shifts coming up in the next year when it comes to congressional seats. Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Alabama are all at risk to lose a seat in Congress. Idaho, Colorado, Texas, Louisiana, North Carolina, Florida, all stand to gain congressional seats. And it's just a matter of how our population has shifted over the last decade. And all of this is important because those people represent us in Washington. So it's important to get a complete and accurate count in the census to make sure that we get all of the congressional seats that we deserve based on our population throughout the country. Once they apportion, we're going to have redistricting. So 2021, redistricting is going to be in the news a lot. If you add a seat to a state, you have to then recarve the population into those 810,000 person districts. So they don't just do the congressional federal level, they also do this on the state level, with state houses and state senates, school districts, voting precincts, all of it gets rejiggered. The other thing that census data is used for that's super important to community action is distributing federal dollars. Most of the programs that we run are based off of census numbers, informing how much money each state gets. These are things like the WIC program, TANF, Section 8 housing vouchers, Head Start programs. A lot of the programs that we run as agencies, it all comes down to census numbers. Census information is also used for government planning. Where do we put a new fire station on a local level? How do we zone this particular section of the outskirts of town? Should it be commercial? Should it be residential? Those sorts of things. Informational, it informs organizational decisions. Where do we put an ice cream shop? Well, let's look for where there's a high population of young kids. And maybe that's where we should put our ice cream shop. Those sorts of things. The census data is also used to enforce voting rights and civil rights legislation, which is why we have the race questions and the Hispanic questions on the survey. So when does this all happen? So the census actually started last week in Alaska. There are some remote villages where you can only get access to in the middle of the winter when everything has frozen over. So last week, the head of the Census Bureau drove a snowmobile up to Tixlek Bay, and they counted the population of Tixlek Bay. Those are also Native Alaskan populations, and they winter together, but then as soon as the thaw starts, they scatter because they're hunters and gatherers. The rest of us, group quarters will start next week around the country. So if you have a domestic violence shelter or a homeless shelter, assisted living facilities, dormitories, all of those will be counted through cooperation between the Census Bureau and the administrators of those buildings. So that starts in February. The rest of the country on March 12th will get invitations in the mail. Most of those invitations will be asking people to respond online, or on the phone. Some of them will be actual paper forms, and there's a slide we'll get to that I'll talk about that. We're hoping that 60% of the population responds by themselves. Self-response is the key for hopefully 60% or more of the country. And they're hoping that most of them will do it online. The online system is new this year. The phone system is also new this year. There's always been a hotline to ask questions, but this year you can also fill the form out over the phone. So if you have a rural area that has really spotty Wi-Fi, people can call in and fill out the census form, or they can look for their paper form in the mail. If they have a P.O. box, the Census Bureau will hand deliver a paper census form to their front door. So those are lots of different ways. But for the majority of America, invitations will be sent between March 12th and March 20th. They'll send reminder postcards a couple of times. The second time they'll send an actual paper questionnaire, and they're doing that to save on printing. A final postcard will be sent April 20th through 27th, and then May 4th to July 24th, the Census Bureau goes door to door, and they will knock on the door of any family, any household that hasn't responded yet. So the one thing I skipped over on the slide is the actual census day. So the census day is April 1st. Nothing specific happens that day necessarily. You don't get a letter in the mail. It's not, you can go online and fill out the survey that day. What's important about this is no matter when you fill out your survey between March 12th and July 24th, you think about the people who lived in your house or home on April 1st. This is what I call a snapshot. People move all the time. People, they travel, they might move from house to house. You might have a divorced family where the kids share time with their parents. So they might be with their mom on Wednesday, April 1st, and their dad on Wednesday, April 2nd. So the Census Bureau has designated a census day. So whenever you fill out your census form, you go back to whoever was in your house on Wednesday, April 1st. Now, I will say that if you are part of a divorced household and you don't know what the other parent is doing, I would much rather both of you put your children on that census form than neither of you. The Census Bureau is very good at deduping records, but they can't make up information that they don't have. So if anybody ever has a question of, do I include this person who's in my household sometimes, always err on the side of over-reporting rather than under-reporting. Over to the slides. Okay, so 95% of households will receive some kind of census information by mail. It might be a paper form for some of the more internet-challenged areas of our country, but most of them will get their invitation by mail. 5% will receive their invitation on their doorstep when a Census Bureau employee drops it off. Those are usually pretty rural areas. 1% of households will be counted in person. These are the Tooksuk Bay, Alaska natives. These are homeless populations, and the Census Bureau has a good plan to count homeless people. But then that's just for the initial phase of it. They are estimating that 40% of households will require in-person follow-up. So they're going to end up knocking on doors for 40% of America. To figure out how your invitations will come in your area and how you can advise your customers on how they're going to get census forms, we didn't pull a slide up of it, but you can go to the link. We're going to send this presentation out after the webinar is over. The CUNY map, City University of New York, has an amazing overlay where you can look up your town, your section of the city, wherever you are, and see in different shades. I think purple means a paper copy, but they'll tell you how you'll be invited. So will it be that you are pushed to the web or you get a paper form immediately, et cetera. Very interesting stuff there. The CUNY maps also show you why people in your area might be harder to count than others. Is there a language barrier? Is there internet access issues? Is there mail issue? They'll tell you all of that on these maps, which is so it's a good idea to go check it out just to see what your area is looking at. Somebody might not get an invitation, and this could be, there are lots of reasons. It could be a new housing complex that didn't make it into the Census Master Address file. It could be that the Census Bureau dropped it off at their doorstep and there was a really, really big storm that day and a wind gust took it off into the forest. All kinds of things. One of the most important things we can do is make sure people know that the census is coming and that it's really important for them to fill it out. So if they look for it and they cannot find the forms that they've been sent, they can go online or they can call the 1-800 numbers and answer anyway. The census is a huge operation, so $15 billion will be spent to do this count. They spent about half of it leading up to 2020, and then they'll spend the rest of that this year because knocking doors is really expensive. So in 1970, it cost $16 a household to count. Today, it's going to cost $107, and both of those are in 2020 dollars. So we're looking at 6 times more expensive than it was in 1970. There are lots of reasons for that. We're going to go into in the next slide, but the reason that it's important to make sure that we spread the word about the census is because for every person we miss, our community will lose about $2,000 in federal funding, and that goes towards transportation, childcare, education. Our schools are chronically underfunded, and part of that is because the census counts for children wildly inaccurate. And it's not just $2,000 per person per year. These numbers persist for 10 years until we do the next census. So if you miss 10 people in your area, you've just missed $20,000 for 1 year, but it's really $200,000 for 10 years. So the impact is real and tangible, and it gets to be really high dollar amounts really quickly. So why might people not be interested in filling out the census? We have a very mobile population, first of all. So the statistic is that 14 to 18% of Americans move every year. In our agencies, those numbers are far higher. And the statistic is 30%. But the statistic isn't for how many times a year they move. It's just 30% of our population moves annually. And often they move more than once if they move once a year. So we have a hard time finding people. So that master address file might be missing people who live in a motel temporarily because they've been evicted, or they've just gone from 4 or 5 different places, and they have their mail service is slow and they're not getting things. So the way the Census Bureau does it, every domicile should get an invitation, but it doesn't always work out that way because people move. So we've got a question. What accommodations are made for people that do not speak English? Thank you. That's a great question. There are 2 ways to go about, well, 3 actually. The first thing is that the Census Bureau has toll-free numbers that provide up to 13 languages, spoken languages. And it's in our toolkit, the actual numbers and the languages that are listed. There are 2 versions of Mandarin. There's Spanish, there's Japanese. There's a list of them. So we can have people call in who have issues with English or don't speak English. They have also translated documents into 59 different languages online. So there are language guides for 59 different languages. And again, I believe our toolkit has all of those listed. There are also Braille and TTY, hearing, I can never say it, but the hearing, hard to hear folks also have a hotline. And Braille materials are being printed. I need to get my hands on some of those so I can share them with you, but that they are available, and your Census Bureau contacts can help with that. So thank you for the question. Okay, so let's go back to the environment. Mobile populations, that's a problem. Rapidly changing use of technology is also a double-edged sword. It's more convenient and more environmentally friendly to push people to the website to fill out their census forms. You don't have to rely on the mail. But then you have to get people to cut through the clutter and actually go online and find it. The fact that everybody carries a computer in their hands, they always have these little things in their hands, and they beep and they ding and they have notifications galore. There's news, there's text messages, there's Snapchat and Twitter and Facebook and email addresses. We have to cut through all of that clutter with paper mail. It's a lot to ask, frankly. And there are companies like the Lending Club that have realized that if they make their envelopes look like government official documents, then people are more likely to open them. So sometimes you can see a legit government envelope and not think that it's something because it looks like a junk mail folder. There's a huge distrust in government, especially in our current political climate. Things are nasty out there, and it's spilling into all aspects of government. So people distrust the government more than normal. So they're not as likely to trust to fill out even a simple demographic form for information the government probably already has. They're not really inclined to do so. We also have an increasingly diverse population. America is a melting pot, and we have new immigrants from countries where you would never tell the government any of this information. And so they're not used to a census. It's not something they've done before. and they have distrust of their former government, and so why would they trust the U.S. government? All of these things are a barrier, but the most important barrier that we have a chance to break through is the informal complex living arrangements. We've already mentioned divorced households, but there's also the grandmother taking care of her granddaughter. She might not think that she should put her granddaughter on the census form because any day now her mom's going to call and take her home. She doesn't really live with me. I'm just taking care of her temporarily. Lots of reasons why. A grandmother might not think that a granddaughter she's been caretaking for should be on that census form, and she should for two reasons. First of all, if you're caretaking a child, even if you're not related, if you're a family friend and your son's best friend is in trouble with his parents and so he's crashing on your couch, he's living with you. I would rather that kid's actual parents put him on their census form and you, his friend's mom, then nobody put him on that form. So again, always over-report rather than under-report. But those informal complex living arrangements are really difficult to educate folks to let them know that the right ways to do this. If you have a couch surfer, a friend of yours who's just in a rough patch and staying with you for a few days, doesn't have another home, they go on your census form too. But getting that information across is really difficult. All right, I've got another question. Does the estimated $2,000 loss per person impact allocations to our state or the local community? Both. Because the way that some of those programs allocate funds is based on populations and poverty rates, et cetera. We deal with people who live in poverty. So if our poverty counts are off, then our state funding is off, which trickles down to our local communities. So it is both. All right, so the Census Bureau has hard to count areas. They've identified 17 different categories of people who are considered hard to count. Native Americans, low-income folks, people with young children themselves, single parents, people of color. You get the idea. This is a who's who of community action. This is why we are involved. These hard to count people can be hard to locate because they move around a lot. They can be hard to persuade to fill out the form because they don't understand the impact or they don't trust the government. They could have language barriers. They could be homeless. They could be all of the above or any combination thereof. One of the things that we have promised to do in our relationship with the Census Bureau is encourage folks to sign up for census jobs. They're going to hire 500,000 people across the country. And we are really hoping that our local communities will take up those jobs because we want people who look and sound and act like the communities where they're working to be involved. The last thing you want to do is bring someone from New York City or Boston down to Atlanta to knock doors with a different accent, with a different, you can tell I use my hands a lot. I grew up in New England. I don't have a Southern accent, so it'd be awkward for me to go knocking on doors in that area asking people for this kind of information. So if people are known in the community, it's a better liaison for us to ask those questions door to door. But the jobs have good hourly wages. It's between $13 and $27 an hour, depending on where you are. It's flexible part-time work. A lot of these areas, a lot of the states have provided waivers. So if you have TANF and if you have SNAP benefits or WIC benefits and you don't want to work for the government because you might lose those benefits, a lot of states have waivers. We really need to hire these positions. I'm very worried that we're not going to have enough people to knock door to door. So this website, or this slide deck has these two websites at the bottom where you can check that out. So, been long-winded. I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit. Why does it matter to us and why does it matter to the VITA community? The people who are hardest to count and are least likely to fill out the census come through our doors every day. They are the people that your VITA assistant preparers will be helping, period, full stop. We are trusted messengers. They come to us in their time of need when they have nothing else, nowhere else to turn, and we help them. Same thing with our VITA preppers. They trust them to show them personal, financial, sensitive data and help them prepare it to send to the government. So it's a very natural fit for us to ask our VITA volunteers to take the message of the census to the people that they're helping. And it's all about getting our fair share of dollars and representation. These are some of the programs that are funded through census dollar or census counts. So I mentioned some of these before: CSBG, which all of us use, LIHEAP and Head Start, which most of us implement, TANF, substance abuse block grants, rural rental assistance programs. You name it, if it's a program in an agency, the chances are pretty good that the funding is based somewhere, somehow, on census dollars. Also, all of us do community needs assessments every 3 years, and we base those numbers off census numbers. So if the census in our area is wrong, then our CNAs are wrong for the next 3 years. And so it also helps us on a local level in that way. All right, we've touched on this a little bit, but I want to expand on it a little. Our VITA volunteers come in and help people prepare their taxes. They just finished their taxes. And so it's a very easy argument to say there's one more government form we need you to fill out. A lot of arguments go out the window, especially like the government doesn't need to know about my family, if you've just helped a person fill out their earned income tax credit where they put their 2 kids on to qualify for that tax credit. So by combining the census with VITA, we're hoping that we can encourage people to take that one next step to fill out that census form. Especially because kids from 0 to 5 are some of the most undercounted groups. Again, if you put your kids on your tax form, you should also fill out your census form and include your children. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's being done. I'm going to try to go through these slides quickly because I want to have time for questions. As I mentioned earlier, the Census Bureau has been a partner of Community Action Partnership. I'm actually in Louisiana, which is why I'm in a hotel room today. I'm presenting with the Census Bureau this afternoon. We work in tandem with them. They answer our questions. They give us materials and advice. We have a good relationship. We're encouraging all of you to go online and partner with the Census Bureau as well. If nothing else, you'll get emails about interesting factoids. If you're a data nerd like I am, you'll enjoy them. They crunch numbers. That's what the Census Bureau does. They take all of the information we fill out in the census, and they determine how the maternal age has changed in the United States. So in 1950, it could have been that 22 is the average age a woman has her first child, whereas in 2020, it might be 30 or something. That's the kind of information that they pull out of the data that we provide during the census. There are census regional borders, census regional offices. These are the borders for all of those. Louisiana, no, not Louisiana, I'm in Louisiana. Los Angeles, Denver, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York City, and Atlanta are the head regional offices. We didn't put them in there, that's good. So we have contacts in all of those places. So if you need to reach out to a partnership specialist or the Census Bureau, we can help with that. We might actually throw those slides in because I know we have a nationwide crowd today. To give you that contact information. The Census Bureau has a complete count committee program, which I think is one of the best ways for us to actually reach out to our communities. It's kind of like a tripartite board. They have local elected officials, they have local nonprofits and local businesses all working together to get the word out about the census. I know for a fact that there are some areas where community action is the complete count committee for one or more counties. Special shout out to Oklahoma because I know that they're doing a heavy lift out there to make sure that their populations are counted. But these committees, there's a website. No, I didn't put it in here. So it's on the bottom. I didn't put a photo of it, but you can go onto the Census Bureau website and find the local complete count committee near you that should already be underway doing some work. And then you can reach out to them and say, hey, we're here. How can we help? How can we plug in? We also have something called the Census Counts 2020 Coalition. It's a really cool group of folks, 25 different entities and counting, encompassing a wide swath of America. So they've tried to bring in every ethnic demographic, and all of the groups that help with certain hard-to-count populations. So the National Disability Rights Network, Color of Change, and the National Urban League, NALEO, which is the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Arab American Institute, a wide swath of America. These are resources. So to go back to that question about languages, if there's a language that you need, and I've been asked for Creole, and I'm getting that for folks, that isn't in the census materials, ask me. One of these partners is most likely putting that information together, or if I ask them for it, they have the resources and they can. So it's a neat coalition, and it gives us a lot of resources. Some of the things that we send around in our newsletters about census stuff come from these partners as well, because it's not worth reinventing the wheel, and they're giving that information to us. All right, the Census Partnership Specialists, I mentioned a little bit earlier, they can come train your agencies, they can come train your VITA staff and volunteers if you'd like them to. They also have flyers and pamphlets and census giveaways. I saw a water bottle the other day, squeeze balls, t-shirts. And our Census Coalition members, in addition to just all of their websites have information, and the Census Counts Coalition website has resources. There's a list of state leads and hubs. So you can look and see who's in your state working on this project in the larger scheme of things, to see who else is out there. I can also connect you. Sometimes it takes me a couple days, but I'm also happy to figure out who the best person to reach out to and who to connect to would be. One of our jobs as a partnership is to educate and raise awareness. We're mobilizing everyone to take action. We're helping you by giving you resources. If there's something that you can think of that we're not doing, please ask me. We are a small team, but we really want to do what we can to make this easy for folks. We have a 10-member working group that's scattered across the country in some of the hardest to count states. As our sounding board, and they're also pushing the census activities in their area. This is our website. Our URL is communityactionpartnership.com/census-2020. This is where we're putting all of our resources, and that's the best place to find community action specific information. We also have a complete count committee for community action. Many of you are already on it. We are asking that everybody nominate one person in their agency at least to get our emails and to be the point person for census activities in their area. You can find that web link signed up on our Community Action Partnership Census website as well. The Moodle Academy. So we currently have one Moodle track ready, and we're going to do 2 more in the next several weeks. One is based on agencies and how agencies can interact with folks and be ready for census activities. And one will be a train the trainer. So we're putting those together. The current one is for an individual, a frontline staff member, a VITA volunteer. They can go and spend less than 2 hours online learning about the census so they can answer these hard to answer questions and make sure that they have the information they need to encourage folks to participate. So our goal is to make it easy for all of you to do this work in the context of all of your other work. We're not asking, I mean, if you have the resources to do dedicated census activities, that's amazing, but it's not likely. And why we're here today to talk about VITA is because we're asking you to slip the census into all of the VITA stuff that happens in your agency. It's an easy ask for somebody to be filling out the census form, or tax forms for the government and including a census form. They're part and parcel. And I think that it helps, if you're filling out taxes, it helps people break down some of the barriers that they might otherwise have about filling out the census, especially one of those #1 causes of trepidation, which is the government doesn't need to know about my family or my kids. Well, the government knows about your taxes and your income, so they do already. So it helps break down that barrier. So we are asking that when you finish filling out a form with somebody, you ask them about filling out the census form in the context of your other work. That's the goal, because we want to make this seamless and easy. Knowing the census basics from one of our webinar primers, you're learning a lot of it today, from our Moodle Academy, our videos, all of that's a good starting point. And we have buttons, posters, fact sheets, postcards. We're developing a lot more materials in the next few weeks, which will all be online. And we are more than willing to modify them and throw on your logo so it's branded for you, or create something entirely new. And if you need something, the chances are pretty good that somebody else might need something as well. Lil, can I ask you to take over for a minute? Can you jump in on this?
Of course. So what can you do locally at your agency? And I want to remind you all, to please enter. People are doing great about putting a few questions in, but anything that you're thinking about, someone else probably is too. So please do enter something into the chat box if you have a question or a comment. So when you talk to people who are considered hard to count, and sometimes we say hard to locate because people aren't hard to count, right? Getting them to talk to you perhaps is. The right messaging is absolutely key. What we're asking, and VITA is the great example, is to incorporate the census into your existing contact with customers. Research shows that it takes 7 touches to actually get information into someone's head. That's us talking about the census to the field, but that's also 7 touches for people in the field to learn about census, whether they work in our agencies or served by our agencies, go to church together. It usually takes 7 touches. But as staff, we are trusted messengers to the clients and customers that we serve in our agencies every day. If people are worried about census safety and we're able to show them that it is safe, then they're going to probably believe us. We have some terrific videos online and more coming online as we speak. We're actually working with a great agency in the Northeast, developing some new short videos. So the one you see in the upper left-hand corner is already on our website. That is Derek Simpson, the Long Beach Community Action Agency. It's only 7 minutes, so it's perfect for staff trainings, for board meetings. You're welcome to use it at church or Rotary meetings or Lions Club, anything else that you want to use it for. And it talks about how to talk to people and dispel some common myths about the session. As the other videos come on, we'll be putting that out in our census newsletter, our full partnership newsletter, and we will also be letting our complete count committee know. They tend to get the news first. So please do get someone signed up for that from your agency. So the real messaging starts as you think how you would say it. What would you say if someone said they were afraid to fill out the census? Or if they thought it wasn't important, doesn't impact me? Doesn't matter. If somebody struggles with forms, if somebody doesn't have good internet or mail service. These are the messaging things that we have answers for you that are research done by our partners and a lot from us in the field, messages that are heard. So for instance, why kids are undercounted so much. You can see the bullet points here on the screen. Parents don't know how data is used. They're thinking it's political. They think the government already has the data, and we're going to get to confidentiality and why the census doesn't share data and why it really is safe. They have privacy concerns. Lindsay touched on many of these in her earlier remarks. They're too busy. There's fear, too many people in the home, undocumented or immigrant status. Complex households. We have a lot of intergenerational households. We have households where friends are doubling up with their families to make it work. So it can be complicated. 80% of kids that are missed in the census live in some of these complex households. A lot of the people we serve, yep, complex households. So research messages that work. The resources that our community needs depends on counting everyone. So funding for schools, childcare, housing, transportation, VITA programs, keeping the agency doors open with CSPG so we can run VITA programs, whatever program you're touching a customer with. The odds are good that at some level, even if it's CSPG, at some level, this data is supporting our programs. Let me move on to top messages for kids, and then I'll see if Lindsay would like to take that ball back. So top messages, what really resonates for people, and this came out of research commissioned by the Count All Kids campaign. 82% of people respond to the message that counting kids means more funding in our schools. As simple as that. If they're counted, it means more funding. And as Lindsay noted, the census is every 10 years, looking at the last bullet point, 81%. If we miss kids this time for the next 10 years, so if your kid is 5 and starting kindergarten, if they don't get counted this time, they're not going to get counted again until they're in the middle of high school at 15, right? The resources are going to be messed up for that whole time. If you multiply that by even a couple of handfuls of kids in a community, you're talking some serious funding gaps and some serious needs. So African American communities. Lindsay, would you like to jump back in?
Yep, I will. Thank you. I figured people were tired of hearing me talk alone. So the Color of Change did the research focus groups for this section. Black adults, especially those 35 and older, have a generally positive impression of the census and recognize the importance. Black millennials are a great target audience, though, because a lot of them are less likely to recognize the importance and say they'll participate. Among that proportion of folks who are less inclined to participate, they don't think it'll make a difference to their community. They think that the government has other ways to obtain information, which is true, except that if you don't fill out the census form, it doesn't matter. The government does have a lot of this information already, but if it doesn't happen through the congressionally, constitutionally mandated process, it's irrelevant, which is just the system we're dealing with. It's less than ideal, but it is how it is. They also feel that the questions are intrusive. And again, if you're filling out your tax forms, the government knows a lot about you already. If you're coming to an agency for LIHEAP assistance, the government knows a lot about you already. So the messaging for African American communities that has been found to be most effective is ensuring funding programs for my community. That resonated with the most people and moved them from, I'm not sure I'm going to fill out the census form, to I probably will participate. Funding specific government programs is important, especially if you talk about Medicaid and food stamps. Clearly, communities going back and forth. This will impact your community as a way to move the African American community towards participating. I'm going to move on because I really want to have time for questions. Hispanic community, generally they didn't mind the census. Hesitation, fear, and cynicism arose when they saw the version of the actual questionnaire. I don't know if that's before or after the citizenship question was put to rest. My guess is that it's before, and I didn't have a chance to ask Naleo for that nuance. And they also prefer a paper form, so they're going to have to wait for the mail in April to come for that. They don't want to fill out the form online. They certainly don't want people coming to their house. So that paper form is going to be crucial for this community. Any messaging is better than none. So having them hear anything at all about the census is better than them not. These are the messages: safe, convenient, required, civic duty, funding. Those were all tested. Safety and security is really one of the keys for this group. Letting them know the census protections, which we haven't quite gone over yet, but first of all, Title 13 is something that all Census Bureau employees pledge an oath to. It says that they will not reveal private data, personal information about any individual. If they do, they're liable to be fined $250,000 and or jailed for 5 years. This is a huge deterrent. This was put into place in the 1970s for a variety of reasons. If anyone wants to talk about that offline, I'm happy to go into it. But it was to specifically shore up the security of the census to make this a safe process for everyone. The second thing is that all of the forms we fill out in 2020 will be kept under lock and key for 72 years. So they won't be released until the year 2092. So if you've got somebody who's really worried that their landlord is going to find out that they have 5 people living in an apartment that's meant for 3, or if they have a Section 8 housing voucher that's for a certain number of people and they have family members staying with them that push them over that limit, no one's going to find out about that until the year 2092, when it won't matter anymore. So that's why they have that security protection. So those messaging and that information will really help the Latino community and the Hispanic community fill out their census forms. Also helping them, letting them know that it does impact school funding, state and local services, police, fire, healthcare, community schools. All of that stuff is also a really great message to move those folks over. We're going to send this out, so I'm not going to go over this stuff. It's just a finer drill down of what I just talked about. Asian Americans, they prefer paper and online options to phone and in person. No one's concerned about the citizenship. No one should be concerned about the citizenship question anymore, but they are. And it will come up in the news again. It's a fear-mongering tactic that we'll be seeing it. But for Asian American communities, we need to highlight that the census helps our community get their fair share of resources. So going back to our community and getting funded. Native Americans, they have a history of betrayal in this country, which is not surprising to me at all. So they're concerned about privacy. They wonder why they should trust the government at all. But these two down here, the quotes on the bottom, the census is critical. By participating, we speak for generations of Native people before us and for those yet to come. Really, really powerful. Census data can help determine our Native communities' needs for schools, housing, healthcare facilities, and roads. All of that is really, really important and breaks through a lot. And then the second quote really strikes me. We want to make sure that the American Indian and Alaska Native community, which is growing every day, is not invisible. A lot of tribal folks feel like they're invisible. And so being counted in the census is one way to counteract that. Clearly, there's a lot more in those slides. We're going to send them out. We've got a few questions in the back here, and then I want to show you the toolkit, and then we'll answer some questions. If anybody has any more, please put them in the chat. Do you participate if you're not a citizen? I don't think I really hit this, but yes. Anyone who lives in the United States on April 1st gets counted. The visiting foreign exchange student who's here for 6 months gets counted. The diplomats who work in an embassy, they get counted. Asylum seekers who have crossed the border and are being held in detention facilities, they get counted. People who are incarcerated, American citizens who are in jail, they get counted. They get counted in their jails, but they get counted. So every person who lives in the United States gets counted. Military abroad, they get counted as well. If you are an expat, if you're an American citizen living in Italy, you do not get counted. But foreign service, military service members, American service members serving in foreign soil do. Do they come to my house? If you don't fill out your form by the end of April, they will come to your house. If you do fill out your form before the end of April, they're less likely to come to your house, far less likely. They might come for another survey because the American Community Survey also happens. The Census Bureau does not just do the decennial census. Or they might come for a follow-up question, especially if they've tried to call you and they can't get a hold of you. But the best way to prevent somebody from coming to your door is to fill out the census early and completely. Is it safe for me to provide my information? Yes, so we just talked about this. The one thing I didn't mention is that the census data can only be used for statistical purposes. So just like the statistic about at what age the average American woman has her first child, they're not talking about Joe Smith or Sally. They're talking in general. That's how all of the data is used. The Census Bureau gets information from lots of other bureaus. ICE, probably maybe not, but Homeland Security for sure, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, Health and Human Services, the IRS. They send information to the Census Bureau that they use to double check their information. But they do not send information back to those agencies. So ICE, Homeland Security, FBI, any other law enforcement entity does not receive information from the Census Bureau. It only goes in. It's a one-way door. And then you've got the 72 years and you have the Title 13 oath. All of that makes us very safe. Can I help someone fill out their census form? Yes, you can help somebody. We help people fill forms out all the time. If you know that somebody will not fill out their form, you can't go in and fill out the information on a census form for them without their knowledge and permission and asking you for help. That is not okay, but you wouldn't fill out a TANF form for somebody because you knew they wouldn't fill it out anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. You can help them go online and pull out the right form. You can help them with their paper form if they bring it to you. You can help them call in and find the right number for their language. Whatever you can do in that capacity, you are more than welcomed and encouraged to do. If you want to talk to your VITA prep folks about this too, they can sit. They just finished their tax forms. They can sit and help them fill out their census forms as well, either online or over the phone, or if they bring in their mail form. That's one of the reasons we're putting things together for VITA. Accessibility issues, we talked about TTDY, we talked about Braille, we talked about in language. People who don't read or write can call in and do the forms over the phone. We've got social media stuff. You can, most of you know this. I think this is the last slide. No, it's not. We've got two more, but we will take questions. Resources, one of them is our census webpage. One of them is our census blog. All of the information we send out on our newsletters goes into the census blog, so it's easy to find. Our resources page is where you can download different flyers and posters that we've created. And that's the bottom one. And then the census counts resources are all of the toolkits from our partners. So that is in here as well. These are our email addresses. Our subject matter experts are Jim Masters and Alan Stansberry from the Center for Community Futures. But Lil, Lauren, and I are all on the webinar today. Lauren, could you queue up the toolkit, please? And if anybody has questions, now is the time to put them in that chat box. I answered all the questions.
Lindsay, we have a question that came in through the Q&A. So can we go to our senior centers and assist them with completing them online? Type in their responses for them if they're telling us what those responses are.
Yes. So when, okay, but hold on a second. Do you normally go to senior centers and help them with other things? If it's akin to something that you normally do as a community action agency employee, then yes, you can do that.
They do.
We do
in
not.
fact, do that. She followed up.
Good. So we don't want people. The last thing we want. Don't go door to door. Don't go. We're not asking folks to do outreach and to go find people to fill out census forms with them. But if people come to you or you go to them to provide community action services, yes, you can help them. Now, an assisted living facility, the Census Bureau has probably already talked to them about how they're going to do the census. It depends. If my grandmother lives in an assisted living facility where she has her own apartment, she gets her own mail. So she will probably get her own census form. But my father-in-law lived in a assisted living facility where he was responsible. He couldn't do anything. The nurses did everything for him. In that situation, the assisted living facility administrator will be the one filling out the census forms. Okay, Lauren, you do what you need to do. We're having trouble getting the PDF, so she's going to share her screen. Aha. So we have put together this toolkit for staff and volunteers. Beautiful cover page. Let's go to the next page. We're just going to run through this real quick. So there's an introduction. One of these pages you can print out several copies and hand to your VITA volunteers if that makes the most sense to you. All of these are things that you can share with them. Let's scroll down a little bit. Introduction about why we're doing this, a little bit about the census with the census timeline on there. Let's scroll down. Just more information about things. Here are those hotlines. So these are all of the ones where you can call in and get a live person speaking in language. And the TDD. This is an actual census form. Yeah, make it bigger. That's good. So this shows the actual questions that are on the form, which can be very helpful. Even if you have a stack of these in the VITA prep room where people can take a look at them and ask questions of folks, even that is helpful. It goes through each person. It asks the gender and the race and Hispanic origin and the birthday and the name of each person. That's pretty much, and you repeat per person. It's estimated that most households, it'll take about 10 minutes to complete the form. Let's scroll down. A bunch of frequently asked questions that are commonly asked of us, which will help people be able to respond. If anybody wants to do some census outreach when it comes to tax season, these are some social media templates and some sample tweets. Scroll down. And then our contact information as well. So we will be, or have we published this, Lauren? You're muted, you can't tell me. If it's not up online now, it will be in the next probably half hour or so. We are exactly at 1 hour, the 1 hour mark. I know it's different for all of you for different time zones. But if you have additional questions, I'm happy to stay on for that. Otherwise, we can end the presentation, and you all have information for us to follow up. Oh, so Lauren's showing you the rest of the handouts that we have. Well, okay, she was. It'll be online. You can shoot any of us an email with questions, and we can help you sort through the census. I know I just talked for a straight hour, and I know I just hit the tip of the iceberg for a lot of this stuff. So, Lauren, do you folks see any more questions?